All right, welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And my phone, which is my timer, so I don't go too long, just fell and knocked over a bunch of stuff. So I don't know if we're gonna be on time or not today, Lisa. Who knows? We'll see. But anyway, how are you doing? What's going on?
Doing okay here. As you mentioned, January was the blink of an eye, and it has been
Gone.
non-stop. Um,
Ugh, gone.
stupidity timeline, I think. So yeah, I know I feel a little bit dizzy.
Oh, that's a good word. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dizzy, dizzying. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. So
It,
who knows what February will hold for us, Shauna?
look, I could have sworn I was just eating like, the usual stereotypical collard greens and black eyed peas for good luck and money and all kinds of stuff for New Year's, as tradition holds for some of us. And now, yeah, the month is over, Lisa. It's a wrap. It's a wrap. But good to be with you because we never run out of topics, and I'm just grateful that we're how can I say we have some good topics to talk about, and at the same time, we know where we were exactly a year ago in January, where we were dizzy with executive orders and everything else, and now we're just I don't want to say settling in because I don't think that's the truth, but we're trying to figure out how to navigate what we're given.
Yes, very much so.
So here we
Yeah.
are. But all right, well, take us into the word of the week.
Okay, so this word is looksmaxxing. It's actually one word, so looksmaxxing. And there are two subgroups of looksmaxxing. One of them is hard maxing, also with a double X, and soft maxing. Now, I came across these words a few weeks ago, and I forget now why, but it sounds like they've actually been around for about a decade. And I was quite shocked, particularly around hard maxing. So this is a trend that has gained significance and traction with young men, particularly via TikTok. So it is the practice of maximizing their physical attractiveness. So it's an offshoot of the incel movement, which is the involuntary celibate, kind of the mansplainers, the misogynists, those folks. And essentially, the soft maxing is, moisturizing your face, doing exercise, kind of burning calories, doing kind of some fairly benign things to make yourself appear more masculine in a very kind of traditional sense. Hard maxing is actually things like steroid use, hair transplants, or even as far as cosmetic surgery. And the jawline, I guess, is a really big thing in the looks maxing movement. And I read about a trend where young boys are using a hammer to break their jaw so that it might reset in a more pronounced masculine position. Right? So the critiques obviously is that it's creating body dysmorphic ideas in young boys, and that is leading to high rates of mental health concerns and suicidality, etc. So there you go. Look at that. Never heard of it before. Looks maxing. Yeah, your face is exactly. She's frowning for those who aren't seeing it, like the little wrinkle between her eyes, and I'm like, that's exactly what my face looked like when I first stumbled across this.
Look, I'm telling you right now. Ooh, so this is interesting. And for anyone who will critique, oh, Shauna goes immediately to race, forgive me. Okay. It's a lens that it will be hard to remove. With that, what's so interesting to me is I would love to know whether this trend does fall along lines of race. And part of this, I know we've seen this, with women in particular along the lines of race in a different form, but kind of a parallel thought here is that some features that are frowned upon in communities of color are then exoticized with white people. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I'll give you an example of this. This is very gendered, and forgive me because I'm not sure if I'm going to have the right language. But for example, when a lot of people were talking about the butt implants at first, where, some, especially white women were saying, I want a butt like Jennifer Lopez, or I want a butt like whatever. Like they wanted more than what they had. And the frustration with that as women of color is, yes, one, exoticizing, but then it's quote unquote overweight when a woman of
Right.
color has the exact same body that is highlighted and featured and revered by white women. And so, parallel to that, as you're bringing up this hard maxing and soft maxing, is I wonder how this falls across race, and if it does fall across race, how many of those features are pulled from men of color in particular? Because I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but Black men have always been critiqued and ostracized about, for example, a pronounced or wide nose, or very strong features, or the prominence of their foreheads, and all these other things that come from the African diaspora. I may be stretching here, but I'm just simply thinking through, where did this come from? What's the origination of it? And did it come from exoticizing some in order to pull from them to get or try to own a particular look? The first thing I thought about was J-Lo's butt. I'm sorry, y'all, but that's where I went with that. It's like, you know, because some of these plastic surgeries and other things that were happening with women, we're thinking, oh, they just spent, 4 or 5 figures to look like the average Black girl, the average Latinx girl that they persecuted for having such a body. So how is that okay? And I wonder if that's happening on the men's and boys side of things now, given the language that you've presented. Because I'd never heard of this until you brought it up, Lisa. Never.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's particularly troubling because it's young boys in their like tweens and teens, and I don't know. I did think about when we talk about kind of the chiseled jaw and the appearing
Yeah.
more quote unquote masculine, in the same way that femininity is often coded white, is this same understanding of what it means to be physically attractive. Is that also coded white for boys and men? But it's been around for a while, so we'll have to do some digging to figure that out. But there's no way there isn't going to be some racialized experience, if nothing else, right? Like, and I also don't know the racial makeup of the incel movement, right? So these are young men and older men who are involuntarily celibate, and there's a whole freaking ecosystem around it. And I don't know if that is a primarily white movement or if it's a racially diverse movement. So
Hmm.
that also probably plays into this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, look, you gave me a new word, a couple of new words here, because I literally have never heard of this. And Lisa, I mean, I'm not like super adept in social media, but I'm pretty good. I'm at least
Mm-hmm.
aware, even if I'm not like an expert on the topic. I'm at least aware that it's floating around. This is interesting. All right. Hold on to that language, y'all, and then let's segue into phase one. Well, the reason why I wanted us to hold on to that word of the week language is because, as you all have seen on this podcast, we're literally educating ourselves, Lisa and I, in front of you
Mm-hmm.
all when it comes to a lot of this language. And so it's almost like this unwritten, ongoing curriculum where we pick up on words and phrases and thoughts that are going on around us that we're like, what do we do with this? And how does this apply to our work? Because it's sure to come up. And it usually does. And so, with that, what I think is interesting is that, Lisa, I think you and I have accidentally created a personal curriculum that we didn't know that we had
Okay.
language. Right? So, For this particular phase, I just wanted to pay attention to something that is yet another trend in social media where people are talking about this notion of a personal curriculum. Personal curriculum. And it's called by a few other names. It doesn't have to be called personal curriculum. It could be a custom syllabus. Someone even called it a anti-brain rot content, right? Which I thought was pretty cool. But the purpose of it, it's a self-designed life syllabus that helps us to reclaim our time, protect our peace. Hello, when we think about self-care, and choosing habits that actually reflect our values. Fascinating. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like the irony of me finding out about this on social media when the whole goal of personal curriculum is to keep your screen time down and keep you
Oh,
off of,
that's funny.
right?
Yeah, that's funny.
And so with that, it can be a self-made syllabus, just like we've done here, frankly, on this podcast, where every week we commit to focusing on a word that we did not know before that we're bringing up now, or maybe you all didn't know and we're bringing up to revisit it to make sure that we're all on the same page in regard to how it's defined. But it's this self-made syllabus that's not designed for traditional grades and credentials or any of that stuff. Um, there was even this notion, Lisa, of productivity. Like we're not trying to put on as if we're being productive because we've created
Okay.
this, but this is for just simply the pleasure of knowledge and growth. And what I thought was really fascinating, because Lisa, you and I have talked about it ad nauseum, what we did
Mm-hmm.
not know or learn in our formal education,
Yep. Yep.
despite us having a bazillion degrees and certificates, things we did not know until we found them out ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
unintentionally, a lot intentionally. And so I thought this was just really important to bring up because for a lot of the Black social media users that I found using this language of personal
Mm-hmm.
curriculum, that's exactly what it was for. It was to explore different things like hobbies and other industries,
Okay.
but to fill gaps in formal education, revisiting some of that history that we might not have found out about, or just simply expanding the frameworks of education that we've had in formal school and education that
Mm-hmm.
didn't fit everything that we wanted to know. And so, Lisa, I think this might be a bit of an antidote for a number of things, whether it's just self-care and interest, or very militant around filling in the gaps that we know we have, especially when it comes to non-white, non-male, non-Christian experiences
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
we just did not get. And so, Lisa, how does this whole personal curriculum idea strike you? Because I know you and I both, we thirst for knowledge quite a bit. It's not like we're people that are just like, all right, we know what we know and that's it. We seek it out constantly as a way of life. So, how does personal curriculum land on you?
Yeah, I love it, right? And I think, I mean, I was just having this conversation yesterday with someone that if we had won the lottery, she was like, I would go back to school and do a degree in philosophy just because I could and it's interesting. And I was like, I would probably go to law school, right? Because, neither of us would have to get into debt to do that. And I know that's kind of within the confines of quote unquote formal education, but it is largely because these things interest us. And so we're personally fascinated by learning more about it. I think we so often limit ourselves to thinking about educational experience within middle school, high school, college. We probably inadvertently restrict our ongoing learning in life. You know what I mean? Like, well, I can't afford to go back and get that master's degree. I can't afford to do that certificate program. Okay, so you can't get the document that does bestow some level of credibility, but the learning itself is not restricted to the four walls of a classroom, right? Like you could look at what the master's degree covers and you could theoretically seek out that information yourself. You just don't end up with the master's degree. And I know that that still counts. I'm not saying it doesn't count in terms of how we value educational qualifications, but it's the learning piece that this personal curriculum is about, right, Shauna? It's about how do you expand your worldview in a way that isn't necessarily in a formal educational setting.
Well, and I think too, the brain twisting part of this for me is when you think about education for the sake of education, it's finally you get this piece of education that's pleasure, right?
Right.
Because for so many people, it may have never been for pleasure. It was always for some expeditious purpose. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
hurry up and get this information so you can get a job. Hurry up and get this information so that you can resist whomever doesn't want you to know this information.
Right.
We've talked about freedom schools before. Like it's always been this urgency of get it done in order to do this rather than
Mm.
just sit and enjoying it because I remember I think I shared this with the podcast maybe before, but just very briefly, I remember sitting on a search committee for a faculty member. And that search committee was so interesting because they were looking at several candidates, but the one and only white male that was a finalist for the position talked specifically about getting his PhD, going to Oxford and a couple other places, and taking the full amount of time. I think he had 10 years to get his degree, kind of just sauntering through this garden of education with no expeditious moves whatsoever, which allowed him to learn in a way that the students in the program that we were hiring for were never able to learn. So imagine white guy, PhD,
Hmm.
sauntering through a degree, now coming to teach executive terminal degree students who are working and have families and other
Yeah.
obligations. They're trying to get through and done as quickly as possible, as I don't want to say as painlessly as possible because there's going to be a little pain involved, but get through as quickly as possible with the least amount of debt as possible. And you don't understand that concept because you haven't experienced it. I'm not sure you're the right guy for the job. And so with that, the dare I say it privilege of being able to enjoy learning rather than
Yep.
the task, the job, the burden of getting information in order to use it in a certain way. I think that's what's really blowing my mind actually about all of this.
So it does feel privileged to just create a personal curriculum and do it for the sake of just for learning's sake, right? Because I want to learn, I want to fill these gaps. Um, because education can be so deeply tied to economic progression. But what you're saying is this idea is a reframe or a transformation of how we think about learning, and that everyone could, regardless of their busy life schedules, create some kind of plan that might be a hobby or a book or whatever with a view to expanding their knowledge. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, and we've seen it before, Lisa. So think about I remember when go back further and recently, way back when, for example, Beyonce's album Lemonade came out.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were a bunch of professors and scholars and other people who happened to be Black folks that created entire curricula around that album and
Mm-hmm.
different literature and other multimedia that fed into the messages that were in that album. Same thing happened with Sinners as well. When Sinners came out, there was an entire curriculum and syllabus that taught us about the Deep South and taught us about segregation and taught us about Asian communities in the Deep South, for example, which was a growing edge for me personally. And so we've seen glimmers of this before, but now we have language for it, which I think is just super empowering, right? I mean, think about something you would want to learn about, and you just, I mean, we're educators by training and by nature, I would say, Lisa. So it probably wouldn't be a huge lift for us to craft our own syllabus around a particular topic. But for folks that aren't educators, they have to start somewhere. Where do they start? Probably, I don't know, their public library, probably a lot of Google searches, that type of thing. But getting people to even think about, oh, I can just create a 10-point list of books, podcasts, and
Mm-hmm.
articles that I want to read on this topic and YouTube links, and that's my quote unquote syllabus, personal curriculum. I just think it is perspective taking at its best when it comes to taking ownership and control of your own learning. I think it's just pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, you have a list of questions here that you could ask yourself to think about building this curriculum. And I was just looking at them while you were talking. And, what was your favorite subject
Hmm.
in school, right? Because you think
Yeah.
about how far we sometimes move from subjects that bring us joy when we're children because, life gets in the way, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, returning to maybe when you were like 8 or 9 and you're in school, what was your favorite subject and why? And then what was your dream as a child? And I mean, that could be a whole host of things, but I wanted to be a film director when I was in school. Like, yeah, I know, right? I did all
No
this
wonder we
research.
love, no wonder we talk about movies so much on this podcast. I love that.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I wanted to go to the British Film Institute, which is like a British in London, like a British film school, and I just like didn't, right? And I went off on this different direction. And so, I mean, I used to collect all this information about films. I used to understand kind of production companies and how that whole system fit together. And now I don't remember half of it, but yeah, so it's kind of funny looking at these prompts here, and kind of asking yourself those questions and then finding a way to revisit what gave you kind of learning joy as a child. That's a really neat piece of this, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So so I'll share my learning joy real quick before we move forward, but it actually does make a lot of sense based on where I am in my life at the moment. I had a lot of learning joys when I was a kid, but one of them, so my grandmother's house and the neighborhood, all the kids kind of hung out together, but one of my closest friends, Lori, she lived not even 1 yard away. I actually have a church next to my grandmother's home. And so you would walk through the church parking lot to get to her parents, her
Mm-hmm.
dad and stepmom's home. And, go up on the back patio, we'd run around, play outside, etc. And so they had this beautiful coffee table book that was nothing but sign language, like the
Mm.
letters and a few basic words and so forth. And so every time I would go to visit her, we would learn a new word or practice our alphabet or what have you. And then later on in life, one of my closest friends was she was ASL certified, I think level 7, whatever the highest level was at that time. And so she signed for sitting presidents and candidates and so forth. And that was like one of those things where I'm like, dang it, I wish I had followed through on American Sign Language. And so then fast forward, Kendrick loves it. And we found that it actually can be used as his language credits in high school. And so we've continued to use it. I found a video of Gallaudet football players using sign language to speak to one another during a football game, and I shared it with him, and he was like, "What are they doing?" And he had a friend in elementary school that also was part of the deaf community, and so it's kind of been our thing now
Mm.
where we have a few words that we communicate. I'm like, I should have done better. It's circling back around, and so my hope is that he gets to focus on it much more than I did. But that was one of my learning joys because you know, isn't it cool to be able to talk to your friend and nobody else knows what you're talking about? Oh, that's cool. Or, I shared that with Kendrick. There were some other NFL players that a few of them knew sign language and were speaking to kids coming on the field, and the kids just, had this life-changing moment where this big guy is talking to them when they're usually ignored. And so things like that I wish I
Mm.
had followed through on as a learning joy and never did. It's coming back to it's coming back to revisit me here, Lisa. So yeah.
Yeah, because you could still do that, couldn't you? You could still
Oh
like
yeah.
learn a new word or like refresh and then expand upon that learning because it's all in your head somewhere. You just got to dig it out.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. So over last summer, I found a series of YouTube videos that taught a lot of usual football language in ASL. And so Kendrick worked on those all summer and just absolutely loved it. And so I probably know football language better than I know regular American Sign Language. And so we got some gaps, but we can always draft a personal curriculum and fill the blank.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll figure it out. But anyway, revisit your learning joys as a kid. I guarantee you it'll dig up some things in you that you want to revisit, and it just makes you happy. I mean, goodness gracious, we have so much Debbie Downer stuff going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
What a great way to expand our minds in
Mm-hmm.
ways that we haven't before. And like a lot of people have mentioned too, in regard to this personal curriculum, Lisa, you and I will beat this drum until we're up out of here. Critical thinking.
Yep. Yep.
A personal curriculum helps you to continue to sharpen your critical thinking skills. Do not let this world make you think less of yourself by thinking, oh, I don't have to put a lot of thought into something because everybody's got it. No, we don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody needs to be thinking. Everybody needs to be thinking and sharpening
Yep.
those. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, take us into phase two.
Okay, so have you watched The Pit on HBO, Shauna?
It's my fave. I love it. Oh my God. So good. It's so good.
Oh.
I have
Okay,
to.
so okay, great. So season 2 just recently begun a few weeks ago, and season 1 came out last year. And the kind of construct of this show, for folks who haven't seen it, is there's 15 shows in a season, and it goes hour by hour. So it's one shift. And it starts at 7 a.m. And so the first hour is 7 to 8 a.m. And then it goes 8 to 9, 9 to 10, so on and so forth, right? A little bit like that Kiefer Sutherland show 24, but it's based in a hospital emergency room in Pittsburgh, hence the name The Pit. Anyway, it is excellent, and it stars Noah Wiley, who I love, and also many may remember him from ER fame back in the day, which I also loved that TV show. Anyway, the reason why I'm bringing this up, Shauna, is because there's been some online discussion, both kind of in newspapers but also on the socials, related to the comfort that is brought to people who are watching TV shows where the stories and personas that are being developed are extremely competent. Because we are living in a time where it feels like we're surrounded by a lot of incompetence, a lot of, as we said in the beginning, dizzying changes and decisions that don't seem to make any logical sense, and just, a lot of, stupidity. So people are retreating to watching television shows where there is this abundance of competence, and it's been dubbed competency or competence porn. So essentially there, yeah, right. So The Pit is a great example of this. And then also, if you've watched The Diplomat on Netflix, which is about Kate Weiler, who is the American ambassador in London. So I guess she's the British ambassador for the United States, and she is clearly, very competent, but is surrounded by less competent people. Also TV shows like Abbott Elementary, which is a favorite of mine, which is a comedy, but the teachers really, really care about their students. And so you're kind of seeing that all the time. Another TV show, Shrinking on Apple, is about psychologists. And then I also added to the list, Shauna, Matlock, which is a show you and I like. Not the old version, the new version with Kathy Bates, which is set in a law firm, and the lawyers, especially Kathy Bates, who is she's an older woman, but that's part of the story, is extraordinarily competent. And so people can't get enough of all of these TV shows because this is the new escapism. So rather than like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or some other fantasy something as being understood as escapism, people are actually moving towards TV shows that depict real life situations with people who know what they're doing, and they're doing it well. And I just thought that was it's so interesting. Anyway, I just wondered what your thoughts are, if you've heard of this term competency porn before, if you've had any other examples.
Oh, great, great show. Number one, great, great word. I think what's fascinating about it is um, I don't know if people who watch pornography in the traditional sense feel this way, Lisa, but I'm wondering if there's this connection between this concept of competency porn, meaning you crave what you can't have at the moment, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you crave what you can't have at the moment. And so right now, especially in the United States, we're craving competency because at our highest
Mm-hmm.
levels of leadership, frankly, we don't have it.
Right.
And of course, the trickle down effect of that. And so with that, you know, I still miss and crave, not perfection, but miss and crave those years where, yes, I'm well aware of politics. I'm well aware of as many world events as my brain can hold. But at the same time, I wasn't in a daily trajectory of worrying whether leadership or knowing that
Mm-hmm.
leadership is not competent to handle it. Now, would they handle it the way I prefer? Maybe not, but it's not a complete fumble, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so, with that, I think that's fascinating. Number one, the connection between traditional and competency porn. But then the other piece I think too is when it comes to shows like The Pit. I have some other examples of it, but um, it really does make me wonder or think through the levels of genius, the
Mm-hmm.
levels of genius you have to have in order to even produce competency porn. And the reason why I mention that is because at the
Mm.
end of we're in season 2 now of The Pit, and I don't know if they're going to do this after every episode, but I know after like the second episode of this season, there was an actual emergency room medical doctor that vouched for the accuracy
Mm.
of everything. Meaning that, so let me give you an example of the competency and accuracy, how it plays into The Pit itself. Imagine, Lisa, I did not know this until recently. They built the set of The Pit, which is an emergency room for y'all that haven't seen it. They built the set of The Pit as an emergency room with wings and so forth, and so waiting rooms and all that. And the set was built before the script was fully written, Lisa.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
so with that, a actual medical doctor coming in and saying, "Oh my God, I'm just using this as a random example because I'm not a medical doctor, but let's just say because they know that this doctor is going to be left-handed, they have the scalpel and gloves on the left-hand side of the room." Like small things like that that we as non-medical people would not pick up and understand, and they got it. And they built the
Mm.
script. My very good friend, shout out to Shayla, who actually is a medical doctor, and she watches this with her husband as their date night. Her husband is not a medical doctor. He loves, they love watching this show because she gets to vouch for what's really real and what's not real, what's
Mm.
creative license and what's not. And even she says, hey, this is probably as close as you're going to get unless you just walk into an emergency room. And so with that, I think we do crave that competency piece, and we crave it everywhere
Mm-hmm.
around us in ways that help us to not think about the lack of competency elsewhere. So, like, for example, I'm still into my Food Network shows, y'all. But I won't watch, for example, what's the name of that show? I think it's like the worst chef in the country or something like that. I won't watch that one,
Okay.
but I will watch. Um, there's another one called Alex versus America. Alex Garnaschelli is a French trained chef who is Italian by heritage and culture, and she is well known around the world for what she does in the culinary world. But she doesn't compete against just anybody. They will pick a cuisine, and she competes against the best within that cuisine.
Okay. Okay.
So quite literally, let's say the theme for this show is potatoes. She'll have someone who has, a chain of restaurants that do nothing but cook potatoes for their chain of restaurants. Or they've won a Michelin star for a dish on potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're the executive director of the Potato Association. So they know every single version of, I mean, quite literally. And so they are experts in this very small slice of the culinary world. And so with that, I just can't watch the chefs that can't cook anymore. I want to watch not only the chefs that can cook, but the ones that are the best of the best of the best in their area of
Mm,
culinary arts. And so with that, it just brings me so much relief because I'm like, okay, everybody here knows what they're doing. So it's a matter of which one do we prefer now because everybody knows what they're doing. It used to be that way for me in society and especially in politics in the United States, where I felt like more people knew what they're doing. So it's a matter of which one is going to choose my preference. But even if my preference isn't chosen, everything isn't going to go to hell. That is not our world anymore.
right, right.
And so I get it. I get it with the competency porn. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I do think it is that pleasure that it brings, right? Like it brings you, like it's just kind of like an overwhelming sense of happiness and pleasure and joy because you're watching people do the things extraordinarily
Mm.
well. And what I find most interesting is thinking about just that shift, how we have gone from understanding escapism to mean something fantastical, perhaps, and now we have shifted because everything is so out of control to escapism meaning competence, which is just mind blowing, really, when you think about that, right?
Oh, but look, if we're talking about escapism, you let's go to language. Y'all know me and Dr. Lisa, we love language. If we're talking about escapism, we have to talk about escaping. What are we escaping
Yeah,
exactly?
yeah,
We're escaping a world in which we can't assume that the majority of people are competent at anything.
yeah.
And if they are competent, that doesn't mean that they're competent about the things we care about, right? So like that's one of the things that I love about the Pit is that especially, for those that want to go see it and haven't before, I'm not going to give anything away here, but just thinking about, for example, their characters have the medical knowledge, of course, but then there are times where they have the social skills to understand what's going on. They also have multiple language skills with what's going on. Um, so, with that, I think sometimes I learn even more about their story with the nonverbals than the verbals because it's clear, even by body language, that they understand certain things that are going on. Um, I know you probably remember more than one episode where there was the thought that, oh my goodness, abuse may be going on here. Not once did anyone ever say the word abuse or abusive or sexual abuse or any of
Right,
that,
right.
but it could be a glance that says, something's off, and you and I both know what's off, Lisa. We know what to do. And so some of those things, it's like that to me is a level of competence that Lord knows we do not have in the real world right now in leadership. And I'm grateful when I get to escape to remind myself what it looks like because I don't want to forget what competence looks like either, Lisa.
Yeah, that's such a great point, not forgetting what competence looks like. And the fact that we feel like we have to go to a TV show to get it is
Hello.
such a comment on where we are, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, like we have to, because so much that's been happening has really become noisy and difficult to pass through. And a lot of people are just switching off, right? They're just tuning out. Um, and with that tuning out comes this acquiescence, right? Comes this kind of like rolling over, so to speak. And in that behavior is also you forget what's normal versus abnormal, what's competent versus incompetent, right? Because the status
Mm.
quo has become so diabolical that that just feels normal. And so I really just want to underscore that you said that because I think we need to turn to other opportunities to be able to be like, no, no. Like we can have a baseline expectation that our leaders actually know what they're talking about. Like they're just not like pulling shit out of their ass because they can just speak off the cuff and millions of people are like,
That's right.
oh yeah, that's obviously correct when it's not, you know?
No, it's not. It's not. And that's what I so appreciate about those types of shows is it just, it does remind you there are people that are extremely competent at what they do. They've
Mm-hmm.
gone through like the I can't remember exactly what character in particular, but just in general, y'all think about it. We know the rigor that medical doctors have to go through in the
Mm-hmm.
United States, including, board exams, so forth, so on, have to go through residency, et cetera. And there's one character in particular that wants to do a double residency. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, Lisa, that would be, I guess that would be almost the equivalent of you and I saying we want to get a PhD and a JD, or a PhD
Yeah.
and like it would be a double terminal type degree. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, again, these are the upper echelons of competence that we don't see, rarely see in leadership in this country at the current moment. We are literally seeing people that are patrolling the streets with almost no training and a few
Mm-hmm.
extra zeros in their bank account, and people are dying because of it. That's a reality when it comes to competency. Whereas, thank goodness, there have been a couple of states that have made it clear on their social media accounts their level of competence in distinguishing themselves by
Yep.
saying,
Yep.
we are not going to comply with that. And oh, by the way, in case you are minding your business, doing your own thing, we are going to be wearing very brightly colored vests so that you know that we are distinct from that other group that is pretty much
Mm-hmm.
terrorizing the country, because we want to make sure that you are protected and your property is protected in our state. That is, to me right now, competency porn. I'm like, oh, hallelujah, somebody's acting like they got some sense. So yeah, yeah, that's where I am with it. So I'm loving this new competency porn. I think we inadvertently gave our listeners like three new words to
We
chew
did.
on
Yeah. Yeah.
next
Three.
week.
Yeah. Three concepts. Some
Oh,
better than others.
oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, now, Lisa, I guess the homework assignment now for competency porn is for people to stop and think about shows that they're watching, and
Yeah.
if they're noticing some competency porn around certain areas,
Yeah.
and out of their favorite entertainment. It's a shame that competency has become entertainment rather than reality, but
Oh dear
here we
Lord.
are.
Yeah. Here we
Here we
are.
are. Yeah, so tell us what shows y'all are watching, because we need another hit of competency, y'all. Please send it our way. Send it our way. So, well, that's it, Lisa, for this episode of Unfazed Unedited. We gave y'all a lot to chew on here, but if you're thinking about shows that are competency porn, or podcast, we love podcasts other than our own, obviously. Send us some
Mm-hmm.
stuff. You can email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com, or visit our website, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can access all of our old or new shows. And if you like this episode, please share it, like it, subscribe, leave a review, and share with friends, coworkers, or others in this phase of your life. This might be the only time, Lisa, we tell people to share any type of porn, right?
Right. I love it.
All right, y'all, until next time.
All right. See ya.